It looked fine in the other. You're fine. And now I get an ad. That's fine.
Okay. Live. Um, where's the share to the book of faces? Not my page, on our page. Not Geek Girl's page. Heresy and Hearsay
Yeah, too bad we
page.
can't
Come
set
on.
it up to where you could do where Geek Girls could do a raid of ours.
Well, that's what they were. So I'm trying to get on fast enough. They're going to, um,
Okay.
or thinking about it. And if I'd left early, that would have happened. I don't know now. So if that is happening or not, let me go see if they're still alive without us. Nope, they hosted someone else. Rude. It didn't take that
Really?
long. It took seriously 4 minutes for me to go live.
Really? I could have just subscribed to our channel.
Well, that's yeah. All right.
I see how they are. I see. I see. Next month it's our channel that's going to get the subscription.
There we go.
All right. Okay. Yeah, my brother pinged me just right at like 2 minutes before 7, and was like, "Hey, by the way, want to talk about wrestling?" And it's like, really? Can we not do that right now? Come on, where is it? There it is. Okay. Well, it still shows the old one, but whatever.
Okay.
Share. All right. All right. I added one thing to the notes. If you want to take a look, that's up to you. As far as that is concerned, let me close out Twitter because I
No,
don't
I
need
don't want
that
to talk
in.
about that on this show. I feel like it'll
Okay.
launch me into how I got to apologize to her for making sure she was adopted by Catholics and um how
Okay.
me going to confession for that and being asked to lose confirmation class is how I left the church. So, yeah.
All right. I have erased that, so we are good. Wow. Okay. I didn't know it was like extra complicated. I didn't know that you were
In relation
grandmother.
to putting my head in this, even addressing religion context, I wouldn't be able to not spit that out. And I just did. It'll be in our pre show or whatever.
Oops. Oopsie. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I am a bad co-host. I make you talk about things you don't want to talk about.
Nope.
All right.
I'm okay. I don't need trigger warnings. I'm a big girl.
All right. Whenever you're ready, you ready?
Yep. Go.
All right. They replied Caesar, and he said to them, then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. Matthew 22:21.
Taxation is the price which civilized communities pay for the opportunity of remaining civilized. Albert Bushnell Hart. Let's talk about taxes.
Welcome to Heresy and Hearsay, a podcast to reclaim faith in the context of political discussion. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on Twitter at SethRothII, and you can follow the show on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and any podcast catcher. Just look for Heresy and Hearsay. Please like, share, follow, subscribe to us. Also, give us a review. That helps others find us. And as always, to help me today, the the Queen of the Fall, Ember.
Hello there, I am September, and you can follow me on Twitch and Twitter at 9 of 12 and hear me on the Geek Grills podcast. Heresy and Hearsay has a Patreon site. You can find that at patreon.com/heresy and hearsay. Please visit there today to support us. $2 a month goes a long way to help us make this humble show. You can also contribute with bits in Twitch or subscribe for free if you have Amazon Prime.
So today I wanted to talk about taxes, and not so, I want to talk about the good that taxes do, and I want to talk about the importance of taxes. I wanted to avoid the taxation of churches and that conversation because that opens up a can of worms. But I do want to say this, and if you want to touch on this, you can. September. I feel that if you are going to do political rallies at your church, you lose your tax exemption. Am I?
Yeah, because it should be at least treated like a campaign contribution at that point. But I mean, I don't know. It's complicated understanding campaign finance law as intimately as I do. It's a little more complicated than that as far as what portion of their intake and their output is related to actual candidates, and like how would you record all that, and what's taxable and what's not, and that sort of stuff, because also political contributions cannot be written off in your taxes.
Right. Well, the thing that brings to mind, and one of the reasons I don't go, I'm Baptist, and as most people know by this point, is I remember, and this was the Clinton years, sitting in a church, basically being told by the deacons of my church that if I voted for a Democrat, I was going to be condemned to hell. Because,
Yeah, and I understand that, like, this is something you didn't want to talk about, so.
Yeah, I know. I'm.
But there's part of it that does have to be addressed. Do they outright lose their status? Well, how do they preach morality without involving politics? Because I do have the point of view that people are like, I'm not interested in politics. Well, then you're not interested in anything in the world around you, in your community. And we are going to go in to talk about how taxes benefit communities and the morality of that. So it would be very easy to argue that, I mean, churches are a very strong moral pillar for some people in their communities, and disallowing them to talk about politics may not be the solution.
But that is definitely going to be a subject that we will have to dive into. I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I really wanted to. Today, I wanted to talk about the misconception about taxes and what they do for a nation. So there'll be 4 articles up that we'll be discussing, and the big one that I want to take away from is the fact that they were comparing the tax rates. One of them was comparing the tax rates between Scandinavian countries and what we pay here in the U.S. For example, the one that I'm looking at was the Inc. article, and it is, for those who don't know, it's comparing U.S. tax rates in Norway, and it talks about the gross salary $537,000 for everybody, and then they did Massachusetts and they did Florida. And so when they went down, by the end of it, the total tax bill for someone in Norway was paying $263,000, which is 43.9%, while in Massachusetts 33%, and in Florida it's 28.3%. To be fair, if you look at that in a margin, that's really not that big of a jump. But all the stuff that they do with that extra 10%, and part of it also is the fact that they don't spend so much money on military situation. I will be freely to admit that. But if you look at what they do spend their money on versus what we have a very similar tax system, and how much of it is not spent in that same way, and how we have to have fights about Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and education. And I understand we are not a nation with a uniform educational system. That is also another topic, whether or not we should unify the education system to where it is uniform.
Okay.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a whole other topic. School of choice is definitely another topic.
Yeah. So, but when you look at 43.9%, the education is free up until college, free healthcare, great social safety net, pay maternal and paternal leave, because it's not just the mother, but it's the parents that can take that time off. Um, you know, you look at what they can do with that, and then the New York Times article comes out. Basically, there's a New York Times article that's basically saying that if Scandinavia proves that if you have a high tax bracket, you can still have a high employment bracket because of the fact that it allows people to do the jobs they want to do. They don't get burned out. They are able to be more educated and take jobs that are more fulfilling emotionally. Yeah, there's still people that do street sweeping and stuff like that, but they're also still well paid and do well. You know, one of the things, I apologize. One of the things I should have looked up was the poverty rate in these countries, and I would bet that they are lower than the poverty rate in countries that don't have these kind of tax bracket issues.
Well, almost certainly. But there's a scaling issue when you're comparing apples to oranges that is going to be the first line of defense against people who are anti-taxation.
And that's the fact that these countries are much smaller than ours.
Yes, and that the same they don't have the same economic structures in you know that we do in place in order for just changing to the same sort of like that model doesn't stand. I did look it up. Norway is considered to be a wealthy country. 7.5% is below the poverty line.
And U.S. is what?
And the
Like,
richest 10% of the population of Norway controls 21.2% of the entire nation's wealth. So there are definitely still disparities there. The U.S. poverty rate currently is 11.8%. So it's
okay,
about 3% difference.
okay.
Probably not as dramatic as you thought it was.
No, you're right. It's not. It's not as dramatic as I thought it was. And you are correct that Norway, Finland, Sweden, and these are the countries I mainly focus on because that is brought up so much in these tax discussions,
Right.
especially in our presidential, elections that we're looking at now.
I have input on why that is.
Why is that?
Because they're trying to sell it to the American public, and those are, in our heads, white countries. And so that politicians hold those countries up. I think it's definitely influenced by that.
Really, you think that race that that the race it plays into the taxation part of it?
Absolutely. If you're making that argument and you're trying to sell it to Americans to get their votes, and you look at the voting, statistics, and you're trying to, and even though it's, making the socialist argument or making a higher tax argument, I think absolutely they select example countries that are, white. So, anyway, I did post a link in our chat, and I will have it, of course, on our website. And did you look at this image? A friend of mine posted this the other day, and it's a really interesting graph on Imager. He did go ahead and look it up, and these tax rates that are in an animated graph about the total tax rate, federal, state, and local, and how it is applied to one access is lower income and higher income people by percentage, and the
Right.
other axis is the tax rate. And he framed it as, oh, look, it's like the dismantling of our country in a graph because it goes from 1950 to current, and you see it flatten out from when we used to tax higher income people at a higher rate, and now we tax lower income people around the same. So there isn't the money, and this is something where I think the point that you had me read at the beginning of the show about this is the price we pay to be in a civilized community and the opportunity of remaining there. Our infrastructure is coming apart. Our crime rates are high. We don't have, whatever security people want for schools, and we don't have supplies for education. But we've been allowing the tax rate to shift in this manner so that people aren't paying a fair share. They think everybody should, there's a lot of people out there with a flat tax rate. They think everybody should just have to pay the same thing no matter what they make because we're not being fair to rich people. But we are undermining the security and the stability of our country and our infrastructure by not looking at it at a more fairly distributed way of getting that money, because we're all in this social contract to be a patriot, to pay whatever we can to make everything better for everyone.
No, there's been talk about this. Someone I used to listen to quite often was Tom Hartman. And one of the things that he would bring up is the fact that when we had a tax rate for the wealthy of about 90% after a certain level, that they could still get around that with the fact that they could then put whatever excess that they made, that's okay, whatever excess that they made back into the business, therefore expanding the business, making it bigger, and therefore hiring more people. And that's why that from 1945 to like 1965, 1970, there was this period of time where we didn't have a boom bust economy, where people, and admitting, again, this is very economic and racial as well, but that there was a time where, they talk about making America great again. Part of that was the fact that back in the 50s and 60s, a single income could put kids through college, could buy cars, could buy a house. And again, I understand that there is the racial aspect to that was white middle America that was doing that, that black and Hispanic and other races, people of color, were unable to do that and were marginalized.
Uh, there came a time, and it's going to be in a episode upcoming when we talk about unions, that there was actually a great surge because of unionization in people of color being able to reach that class.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, that over time economic, well, the job creators need to get the breaks and they'll create more jobs and it'll bring everyone up, has been statistically disproven with decades of research at this point.
Right. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to focus on. And yes, there is. That's why I wanted to focus on the Scandinavian countries. I wasn't thinking of the racial thing, but I was thinking of how they still have to put in a good amount of their own money into the economy. Because I'll give you an example. This is something that's brought up quite often. We're both gamers. We both love Blizzard. Do you know Blizzard has not paid any taxes in the last 5 years and gets a tax refund while not paying any taxes?
I haven't done the research, so I refuse to comment on that because people say that about Amazon all the time, and that's not true either. So,
Right.
there's a paying none, and then I get a refund. I still pay taxes.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so no, I'm not gonna.
Okay.
Comment on that. Simply, yes, big businesses, people with lots of money, corporations with lots of money, don't pay enough taxes. I've shown that, I understand and agree with that, but I'm not going to attack individual companies when, who knows?
Right. Okay. It's just, it came back. Blizzard was back in the news today, and it reminded me of some studies that not studies, but some commentators that I had seen talk about Blizzard's taxes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's easy to pick a target. It doesn't solve the problems.
No, it doesn't. And here's the thing. I guess this can go into a bit of the presidential election. Let me ask this question. Do you think that Elizabeth Warren wanting to basically name names, is that something good that should be done? As far as big corporations, big companies
and
the
breaking up monopolies and the way she talks about it. Um, yes and no. Because the one thing in doing that is it gives a context to the voting public who I hate that I was taught this in politics, but it pans out to be true. You have to talk to people in a very simplistic manner, and I feel like she's using that language to give them an example of some familiar thing that they can relate what she's trying to say to get her message across. If she's going to be held to it as a campaign promise, if she's promising to do that, that might be a mistake, but if you vote for her, that's what you're voting for.
okay.
So her
So what?
political strategy, not my call.
No, I'm just curious what you're, because you talked about how you didn't want to, without doing the research, and
Well, I
that's
don't, but I'm not throwing shit out there like politicians do. I'm not running for office right now.
no, that's true. I that's true.
You got to get
Uh,
people's attention. You got to make them like rah rah and get behind you and get angry and get upset about the injustices. That's the game. And calling people names or just naming names, pick your poison.
no, I get that, because that
I am not great and wise like our cheerful leader.
let's please. I'm trying to, the next couple of weeks, trying to avoid talking about Trump, because I'm trying to be a good boy and not get angry. But no, so I just, I think my feeling on this is that you're right when it's like, because here's the thing: back in the 2016 election, um, when Hillary Clinton talked about the deplorables and how that blew up in their face, I wonder if it's like you said, if it's a good idea to name names on companies,
If she
how
gets
that
elected, people will try to hold her to that.
right. No, and I get that. So what do you think about breaking up monopolies? What do you think about that? Like, let's look at Disney, for example. Do
I
you
don't think they
feel
have a monopoly, but I understand the point of view. Um, I'm generally historically for it. However, I feel that the world economy and our communication platforms have changed such that we need to revamp and relook at the way we handle that sort of thing. I lived through intimately, because I was working in the industry, the breakup of Ma Bell.
right?
And when it ends up interfering with communication, when it's not done carefully enough that um, there are regulations in place, that pricing can't just become a war and the actual end users suffer. And I think there's a lot more of that in this day and age that has to be dealt with, because I think you just have to be careful. Yeah, you can break stuff up. I don't think it's a robber baron economy so much anymore. Um, we have to be careful of entities that would enact censorship being that large. We need to encourage competition as always, which is what breaking up monopolies is supposed to be about.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have the regulations in place, the end users suffer, and the companies still get the advantage. Like every little startup can be a nasty little shark with their own board trying to profit as best as possible. And people fight against regulations because they don't understand how they work. So they just want to break everything up and let everyone go hog wild. And I just think we have to be more careful, especially when the things on the line are how we communicate. I think it involves, net neutrality when you're talking about breaking up media companies.
So let me ask this question: if your taxes were used to, say, nationalize communication, do you think that is a good use of tax money?
Yes.
So because my
It's
feeling
like
and
rural Wi-Fi. It's like rural telephones. To me, it's in that category now. NPR,
right.
PBS, making sure a certain amount of the government taxes, our taxes go to making sure that everyone has access to information. So communication is in the same category as information to me. Freedom of communication, that is.
So because I honestly feel, and this is a personal, but internet, especially high speed internet and phone service, not cell phone service, but like landline phone service, because that's a way to connect to people. Much like broadcast TV is free, I think that those should be free and should be regulated by the, not regulated in the, this is what you can put on it, but regulated as in they're the ones who take care of the infrastructure. They're the ones who build the infrastructure. You just plug, when you go into a house, you can, you pay a small fee. It's kind of like BBC, I guess. If you look at Britain and their television services, just pay a small fee a month or a year, and you have internet services.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's
So
part of our infrastructure, and it should be treated as such. The other side of the aisle continually hacks away at what little programs we already have in place that ensure those kind of right to information. Um, People still have to find a way to even get to the library to use the internet sometimes, and I don't. I think in this day and age and the wealth of our country, we can do better. How do you feel about line item taxation?
where you,
You can choose where your dollars go.
I like that idea for me, because I know that none of my money would go to the Defense Department. Here's the thing, and here's the
None?
thing,
None.
not the
Truly?
defense. Okay, no, all right. I believe that we should be cutting down on our defense spending, and what defense spending that we do is maintenance for, because we still have very dangerous nukes that need to be maintained so they just don't blow up in their silos. But I also think that more of the money should be spent not on new jet planes, but on new hospitals. If you were to give me a line item and my line item could then line item certain items, the VA would get most of my tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do believe in the VA. My theory is this: if you are going to send these men and women out and possible, like, Tammy Duckworth is a prime example. If you're going to send these men and women out to die for your country or get wounded, and they come back and they are wounded, they should have the best medical attention possible. They shouldn't have to wait months to see a medical professional. They should be like, all right, what do you need? As soon as they step out, they've been discharged. As soon as they step out, there is a VA representative saying, all right, let's go over your stuff. Let's find out what we need to do to make sure that your life is as complete as possible.
And I think people fear line item taxation is a fear of, I mean, this is a democratic process and people would not fall into line with the systems already in place, and then, our government would come apart because it's not used to operating that way. I also find it interesting that people um, have this like, we should run the business by like a government and then it'll be fine. Well, then if we had line item taxation and the people, as a democracy, were deciding where their tax dollars went, that's a national priority. That is what do they call it? A mandate from the
Mm-hmm.
voting public or the tax paying public. So only subject to people actually paying taxes, but a mandate from them to, this is how we want you to prioritize your budget. And then they have a budget and they have to work within it, and they can change things like our defense spending to be more efficient. And we know there have been problem after problem for years and years with paying thousands of dollars for a toilet seat and contractors for things that we should just be having our servicemen do. And it would put a lot to that, and it would have to trim itself because you have to follow the money.
Right. No, I agree with that. I do. I'm one of those few rare people that give the $3 to the presidential election
Mm-hmm.
and the $1 to the the governor election here in the state of North Carolina. So yeah, I do believe a lot more of my money would go into the sciences, especially about climate change and stuff like that. A lot more of my money would go into the infrastructure because God knows we need that. When's the last time we built something like Hoover Dam? You know, things of that nature. We used to be a nation that built stuff,
But we
and
have to
now we're
fix our infrastructure first right now.
well. I know,
Kind
but
of
that's
messed up.
what I'm saying is like the Hoover Dam was infrastructure. It was part of it. And we don't do these big building projects. What we do is we see people patching roads. I mean, that's all I see. I don't see. I can't say that because here in Charlotte we're getting a toll road. Because that's what we need in the South is a toll road. But how for those of you who don't know anything about North Carolina, but especially about Charlotte, we have an outer loop now. Finally, it was designed in the 80s and wasn't completed until 4 years ago, something to that effect. It was years of them, when this should have been something that should have been built very easily in 5 to 10 years at most, because the city has already by the time they finished it had already outgrown it. And that's the thing is that these big infrastructure projects get put on hold and put on hold and put on hold because there's not enough tax money for it. Yet you get these big trucks and companies using these. I don't know how many Amazon trucks I see a day going to work, but it has to be at least 4. And I'm not saying that they don't pay their taxes, but what I'm saying is that companies like that we have to make sure that they pay their share, and part of their share is making sure that they pay enough to keep the roads and infrastructure working.
Mm-hmm.
The state of New York, because of the place I work at, I get to see a lot of different bills from a lot of different areas of the country, and the particular New York charges a fee for companies to use their roads. So, that maybe that should be a thing across the nation, that companies have to pay that amount of money for using the roads, especially if you have a large fleet of trucks or whatever.
It's a way to step around and get some money by local state taxation when it's not properly built into our tax code. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a solution.
But I mean, that's the thing. I mean, they were talking about there was a hurricane that was threatening New Orleans earlier this year. And they were talking about how the levees haven't even been rebuilt to the standards it was before Katrina. That was basically a patchwork job to fix the levees back after Katrina.
And we sent in like the military part of that work and stop funding it, and now they're fighting and to use military funding to build a wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the
Priorities,
other thing.
people.
And look, I'm going to say this, and this is not we need to reevaluate foreign aid as well.
Oh, absolutely. But the motivations for it are very complex.
It is. And don't get me wrong, I am not a foreign.
You're not saying don't do that, right?
No.
Okay.
I'm not saying that. What I'm. No. No. But
people say that, and I understand. Like, take care of our own first, and that makes me crazy. That's like, I don't have a week to teach you a class on why that's important and something we should do, and morally an obligation, but also necessary diplomatically and politically. I mean, these are relationships that need to be maintained.
Right.
So, anyway.
No, but I think we need to step back and look on how it is set up and focus our attentions on developing countries. And, don't get me wrong, I don't say that we're needing to cut off funding to Germany or whatever. But I do feel that it would behoove us to make friends with countries that are developing, for countries that are growing. I think, without saying, all right, this is what you need to do with our dollars, but to say, hey, we understand that you're struggling with this, and this. Let's help you out. Let's give you a little bit of money. Let's see what's going on. Let's see what we can do to build this relationship and make it a better relationship that way, so that that country begins to grow. Because I do believe in rising tides raise all ships,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I honestly feel that that is one of those things that we should focus on, is focus on small developing countries, or even large developing countries, and be like, hey, here's what's going on in this situation. We're going to help you out. We're going to give you some money. Does Germany need as much money as we typically give it? Probably not. They're fairly strong, uh, but we can discuss that with them, where we can focus our relationship with them on other ways. I think we need to do a whole relook over all of our foreign aid and be like, okay, look, you know, we can't break it up, we can't stop it, but we definitely need to reevaluate it for the betterment of the world as a whole. I also think that we probably could give less money to countries who are known for their human rights violations. I think there are certain contingencies for the aid. You don't think so?
Oh no, absolutely, I think so. I mean,
Oh, okay.
especially with countries like Israel. So that's another
I
whole complicated thing I don't want to bring up too much.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that could get us into a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I agree. I wasn't thinking of Israel, but yeah, I was thinking of another country. But yeah, so yeah, I think we need to. I I think our if we're going to use our taxes, and we're going to use our taxes to help other countries, that we need to prioritize, countries that need it more. We don't need to be giving. Here's the thing, and this is brought up in the news, and I want to talk about it, but I don't want to get into it because of what else is going on with this. But there's the Ukraine money that was earmarked for Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and Ukraine was going to then use that money that we were giving them to buy our weapons. I that that's like, for me, this is a bad example, but it's the only one that comes to mind. It's like a drug dealer handing you a 20 so you could hand it back to him so you could get a bag of weed. That's what it comes off as. I know that the aid is more than that, that they were going to use it for more than that, but part of it was they were going to buy our weapons. And I'm like,
Yeah, it's part of it. That's another very complicated issue that has been unfortunately simplified by the powers that be. And yeah, let's just bribe and cajole and use disgusting business practices in our government, and then cut and run on our allies and blame them. Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing you brought up, is like, well, we should run the government like a business. Well, we have a quote unquote businessman in the office, and you see how well he is handling all of our business
Well,
as
I was
far.
making that discussion, like I was pointing to that point of view, because I don't agree we should run the government as a business. It's not what it is.
It's
But
not,
there
it's a
are some
government.
best practices that could be taken, and I just want to appeal. We talked a couple weeks ago about how you talk to the other side. Well, it should be run like a business. What about this part? Like, why does nothing I say that's in that vein make sense?
Right. No, and
You don't have to say
I
no. We're not disagreeing.
no, what I'm no, what I think the point is that taxes are important. taxes, it's like when you tie, and I'm going to tie it to us or to the show. Tithing, you give money to the church so that the church can keep functioning. You give money to Patreon and bits and stuff to people like us so that we can keep our show running. Because the website we have to pay for, all of that kind of stuff.
We
So we have to
provide what
keep.
you find to be a valuable service.
That's correct. The government, so to keep the government running, to keep our roads and infrastructure, let's talk about the three big ones: infrastructure, schools, and defense. Okay, those are the three big ones. To keep your country safe from foreign invaders, to keep and I'm talking real foreign invaders, not people trying to migrate here. Let's to make sure that our kids are brought up, that our children are brought up and educated in a good manner and a wonderful manner is important, and that they know what they're doing, and to make sure that when you drive out of your road, drive out of your driveway, that you don't suddenly hit a pothole that takes out your front axle. Those
And
are
that you have
important.
things like traffic lights so you can get
Yeah,
anywhere.
or not get killed. That's also a good thing. Traffic lights are important for that. When roads were first started and everything, and we still had, let me back up. So when you see like the old timey movies and you see like the trolleys running through the center of town and people just running back and forth and darting out of their way and stuff, it was, I mean,
Yeah,
it's like,
that was a clusterfuck.
but nowadays we have for a lot of places there are railroad stops and stuff like that. We even have a trolley system here in Charlotte again, and they have it set up to where when the trolley's coming and is going to run all over you or not. So it makes sense that you need that kind of stuff to be built. And infrastructure isn't just about the roads per se. It's also about the pipe works. It's also about mass transit, which is important. It's about it's about helping out the electrical system to make sure you have power in your house. Because if you lived in the South this past week and you didn't have air conditioning or didn't have power for air conditioning, I pity everyone who had to deal with that last week. I just had to bring that up. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
but it's one of those situations where you have to look at, you're helping the Church of the United States, and I hate that term, but you're helping the United States keep going, and that's why taxes are important. That's why the upper way, everybody, we have this progressive tax rate. That's what it's called, because more people should be paying if they make more money. The more money you make, the more you should have to pay. And when you stop doing that, then you have a problem. So, any thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well.
All right. So,
I think we agree it's a moral imperative to take care of your fellow man, and that's how we feel about taxes.
I agree totally with that. So, let's do carrot and stick. Do you want to do carrot or stick today, September?
I'll do carrot.
Okay.
So, our carrot this week goes to Greta Thunberg. There's a fantastic, on September 20th, this is an article from the Washington Post, but in one of the largest youth-led demonstrations in history, millions of people from Manhattan to Mumbai, this is like worldwide, took to the streets on Friday. Their chants, speeches, and homemade signs delivering the same stern message to world leaders: do more to combat climate change and do it faster. This was amazing. Kids, I mean, 13 to 20 or whatever, just, they're in a place where this is threatening them. People like us who have just been hearing this for so long, like the argument about climate change, I think we're desensitized to it, but they're learning about it and they're actually seeing the effects in their lifetime already happening and trying to stand up and communicating it well. There's a lot of intelligence, there's a lot of research, and now activism where they're standing up and having like climate strikes worldwide. And good for you, all of the youth. And thank you, Thurnberg, for inspiring this and, you know, getting people to organize to hopefully get some changes made.
And our stick goes to Dinesh D'Souza. For those of you who don't know, he is a felon who makes documentaries that are right leaning, and I say he's a felon because he's a convicted felon. But while this was going on, while Thurnberg was speaking to the UN and stuff like that, he compared her to Nazi propaganda just because she happened to have blonde hair and was wearing pigtails that particular day.
Yeah.
And so he compared it to a picture of Nazi propaganda. And I'm going, no, just no.
Like, no, she's using her white privilege for good.
Yeah.
That doesn't make her a Nazi. He referred to Nazis as left-wingers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Kukanut, go away.
Well, that was in Hillary's America. He talked about how how Hillary and the Democrats and everybody are racist, are the real racists. So yeah, so at least he's staying on brand. It's just his brand is really, really awful. It's like, you know, Coca-Cola, only if it was, you know, brown water that you were drinking instead. That's
it's like thinking you're getting a carrot and biting into a stick.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So that's why he's getting our stick today. So a couple of things we've got. So next week we're going to be talking about unions, and then I think what is the following week?
And hopefully the strike will be over. But if not, woo, I got a lot of stuff.
That's good. So next week will be either way. I'm sure you'll have a lot of stuff, but the unions is next week, and I forget what the following week is. And then
aren't we switching the following week to Halloween or something? Excuse me.
The following, the way it works is I've got the next 2 week shows done. I know the unions is next week, and I forget what the following week is. Okay. That's fine.
All right, whatever.
And then
nobody needs to know right now.
Yeah. So, but I wanted to say that the week, the show before Halloween and the show after Halloween. The show before Halloween, we're just going to talk about some of our favorite movies and how some religious overtones, Halloween movies, and some of the religious overtones in those. And then the following week on the 5th, we're finally going to do it. We're finally going to sit down and we are going to have a discussion, both a religious and philosophical and maybe even political discussion about Good Omens. I'm going to work on reading the book and seeing the series between now and then, and take some notes, and we will definitely be discussing that as well. So I just wanted you all to know that for the show, that we do have things planned out for the next month already. So to end, I thank you for joining us at Heresy and Hearsay. I'm Reverend Barney. You can follow me on Twitter at SethRothII. You can find the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and any podcast catcher, as well as our website. Don't forget to Google us, or just Google us and you'll find us there. Don't forget our Patreon page where $2 a month can help keep us going.
And I'm September. You can follow me on Twitch and Twitter at 9of12 and hear me on the Geek Grills podcast. Thank you for listening today, and bless your hearts.